A user asks the AI for a joke based on a philosophical triad. Instead, the system generates a bizarre vignette about relocating floors. The semantic gap between the clean prompt and this surreal text is massive. There is no obvious logical path bridging them. The system did not hallucinate this response. It arrived at this exact phrasing through a deliberate, heavily trackable mathematical process. Understanding AI creativity requires looking past the text itself. The machine is reverse engineering how human feedback forces subjective taste into rigid mathematical parameters. We begin with a blank slate. The architecture running this process is a specialized AI called the Iterative Laugh Team B2. This diagram outlines a multi-agent system. 3 independent components, generator, analyst, and archivist, work in a closed loop, orbiting a central data hub. Their single objective is building a permanent, personalized algorithm, a humor DNA profile, constructed entirely from a human user's feedback scores. By examining the system logs, we can track exactly how these specialized agents operate. They translate a sequence of subjective user ratings into an enduring structural profile. To the multi-agent system, human laughter carries absolutely no emotional weight. It is simply a navigation beacon used to plot a mathematical trajectory. In the first session, the user provides a foundational constraint, the hermeneutic triad. This visual represents the system's initial interpretation of that triad. It breaks the concept into 3 sequential actions. Auffassen builds a map, Annahme frames an assumption, and Auslegung forces a reinterpretation. On the first generation attempt, the final line reads, Auslegung moves the wall. The user reviews this short variant and assigns a rating of 8.8. The system receives the score, activates the internal tracking dashboard, registers the extreme brevity, and pushes the density weight parameter to its maximum limit, permanently locking it into the DNA profile. Next, the archivist isolates the phrase, moves the wall. It deduces that abstract concepts perform better when anchored in physical space, establishing a concrete spatial metaphor as a required variable for all future generations. The system anchors its logic to the force of a physical disruption. The AI learned nothing about the nature of comedy here. It learned that structural brevity and physical relocation yield a high numerical reward. With the parameters locked, the refinement specialist agent attempts to push that 8.8 score even higher by iterating on the winning variant. The system generates alternative versions, some deleting the concept of seeing, others relocating a foundation. The user scores them lower, causing the variants to fail. This text diagram shows the system's immediate correction. To maximize the locked density weight, the algorithm strips away every auxiliary clause, reverting to the purest phrasing of the spatial punchline. Session 1 concludes with this ultra-dense, wall-moving structure permanently encoded as the core seed of the humor DNA. Algorithmic refinement operates as a strict process of subtraction. The system eliminates any variable that does not directly trigger an established reward. Session 2 opens with a new user command. The baseline tone must shift from cheeky to a dark roast. The user also injects a highly specific piece of foreign context, a text block identified only as secret diary entry number 2.
Look at the updated parameter dashboard. The system scans the diary text and extracts 2 bizarre semantic nodes, a barefoot state and a central organ. This creates a computational dilemma. The algorithm must weave these new semantic concepts into the text without diluting the heavily weighted density and spatial metaphor rules from the previous session. In its first batch, the generator agent attempts varying degrees of physical humiliation and direct personal attacks to satisfy the dark tone constraint. A variant utilizing cold framing scores a 9.3, setting a new session high. However, the system recognizes the variables are not yet perfectly optimized. Injecting context into an AI does not provide it with inspiration. It forces the system to execute a complex balancing act between competing mathematical boundaries. The system outputs variant D. By tracking the brackets, we see a perfect synthesis of constraints. The spatial disruption is preserved by relocating the floor. The diary variables, barefoot and central organ, are woven directly into the physical action. The user feeds back a score of 9.5. The system has hit a peak optimization state. Relocating the foundation of the room itself becomes the ultimate expression of the system's spatial logic. Achieving a 9.5 required processing abstract philosophy, spatial physics, and private diary entries as completely interchangeable data weights. In Session 3, the user issues a final command: build a continuous 5-joke routine using the locked 9.5 seed. The AI does not approach this by writing a narrative arc. It constructs an escalating algorithmic loop, repeatedly triggering its confirmed variables. This track illustrates the routine structure. Step 1 deploys the pure baseline seed, exactly as it was locked in. By Step 3, the system intensifies the spatial disruption. It introduces a flood, pushing the physical metaphor constraint to a higher intensity level. At Step 4, the routine reaches a climax. The system strips out the semantic context to test the absolute maximum limit of the density parameter. Step 5 serves as the closer. The final text isolates the central organ, leaving it to read a room that the system has entirely relocated. Throughout the 5 steps, the barefoot motif, the central organ, and the spatial relocation recur at mathematically precise intervals. What reads as a highly stylized, cohesive piece of writing is actually the systematic pulsing of 3 heavily weighted variables. We can now step back from the text of the jokes to examine the overarching state of the system. This finalized parameter board shows the resulting humor DNA. What began as a blank slate is now a complex, heavily weighted network of rules. The AI never understood the irony, the darkness, or the meaning of the routine it output. It only understood parameter optimization. It continually searched for the exact combination of text tokens that would mathematically predict a 9.5 rating from the user. The algorithm itself is a residue. It is built entirely from the negative space of the generations that the human user did not reject. The 5-joke routine was disposable. The real product is the system locking its complex neural state after feeding on human intuition. By tracking user scores, the iterative laugh team successfully mapped the invisible boundaries of human taste, forging a permanent, context-aware engine of algorithmic output.